Kits, I am afraid to start.
Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and it's time for number 2 of our series of kits I'm afraid to build, or basically afraid to start. And here we have, a lot of people recognize this as being Space 1999, the Moonbase Alpha, and as I say, it's the entire scene. And what's interesting about this, and this is a fairly new release, is it still has the MPC Fun Dimensions logo on here, back when MPC was owned by that company. And I think it's all part of the heritage boxing, in that they don't change any of the artwork unless they absolutely have to. Of course, up in the upper right hand corner here, you see that included is a close-up of Main Mission. Now this is Main Mission from the first season. If you are a fan of the show, you'll know that there was quite a difference between Season 1 and Season 2. Season 2, they had brought in Fred Freeberger, who had been the executive producer for the last year of Star Trek, and they brought him in to try to improve the ratings, although a lot of people say he may have killed off the show. I won't get into that debate. But at any rate, the Main Mission changed from Season 1 to Season 2. Season 1, it was a very open, large area with Commander Koenig's office off to the side. And the only annoying thing about that set was you couldn't really identify where on Moonbase Alpha it was supposed to be. Nothing really resembled it on the outside. And there are videos on the internet showing how they're trying to digitally recreate Moonbase Alpha inside a computer. But at any rate, this is kind of a bonus, this piece here. And that's one of the things that is holding me back from starting this kit, but I'll explain when we get into it. And up here, it says it includes new launch pads, docking arms, and 6 eagles. There's actually 12 eagles in this kit. But once again, when we get inside it, you'll see that it's kind of interesting what's going on. On the side of the box, you can see some close-ups and what Main Mission could look like when you get it put together, which is quite nice. Oops, and the other side's basically the same. On the back, we have a dead-on shot as to how everything was arranged. And the other interesting thing is if you've watched the show, you'll know that in any of the establishing shots of Moonbase Alpha, you can only ever see one landing pad. Even though it was obvious from the dialogue that there were several, you only ever saw one. And that led to one of the early errors in making this kit. And then over here you can see some shots from the actual show and some shots of the model. So let's look at the insides of this kit. Let's see what we've got inside here. Got a couple of bags. This one contains some of the pie-shaped buildings and the floor of Main Mission and some of the landing pad details. This bag has got more parts of Main Mission and some smaller detail parts from the base itself. And this has got more landing pads. Interesting. We'll get into that. And as well, these big curved parts here are the main sides of Main Mission. And these squares are the turbo tubes, the travel tubes that went from part to part of the base. And finally, in terms of parts, we have 4 vacuum form sections that we're going to build the model on. And these are all, they're not square, but they're designed in such a way that you can only put them together one way, so you can't get things confused. Now if we flip these over, you can see, being a vacuum form, they're hollow. And one of the things that you'll have to do is to trim off all this extra plastic on the sides. You might choose to use a trick that people who build vacuum airplanes do, and that is they will fill the back with expanding foam like comes in a can, and then they'll sand it down, and then that ends up taking something that is very flimsy and hollow and ends up making it a very sturdy, thick molding. So whether you choose to do that or not, I haven't decided. You could also, I suppose, fill it with plaster, but that would make it very heavy. So you can see that we've got this is where the various buildings go on, and then you've got the travel tubes radiating out. You can see once again radiating out. I'm not sure how detailed or how accurate the landscape around is. I would imagine it's probably pretty close because they were, after all, following the studio model. Here is an overview of our base plates, just basically set up the way they would be. Now, of course, we're going to lose about a half an inch between each of these segments. But you can see from our ruler that I've got on here that this is basically going to be a square that's almost 18.5 inches on each side. So this is going to be a large model. And this is one of the first things I think that a lot of people, when they open the box and they look at this, they're thinking, oh yes, cool. What am I going to do with this? How am I going to display it? Because basically if you put this together and you put it on a shelf or a table, it becomes a flat surface for people to pile things on, which is not really what you want to have happen to your models. So I would imagine that most people who build this are going to do the same thing that I have planned, in that I'm going to get a nice piece of wood, and I don't know if I'll leave it wood grain because after all this is a science fiction subject and it would be on the moon, but at any rate some sort of board, whether or not you paint it black or whatever, and I would do it in such a way that you could hang it on the wall, and then that way it would be a lot safer from damage. So I think probably most people, that's how they'll end up displaying this model, is putting it on a heavy board and hanging it up on the wall like a picture. Here's our instruction sheet, and it's in the form of a fold out, and of course it starts with a couple of modeling tips. Not a whole lot there, just basically don't eat the parts, and it has some tips on figure painting, and it gives you a color coding for the colored armband, or the colored sleeve I should say, that each of the personnel had. If they were involved with command, they had a black sleeve, medical had a white sleeve, main mission had red, security purple, and if you were a pilot you had an orange sleeve, and if you were in maintenance you had a yellow sleeve. And of course, if you had a purple sleeve, you knew you were probably going to die during that episode. But it starts off with building main mission, and they've got a bit here telling you how to make a spiral staircase, which is interesting, because if you go to the series and look, the staircase that's in the corner of main mission is not a spiral staircase. It's actually a staircase that is square-shaped. So here we've got you building Commander Koenig's office, and there's the globe of the moon and his ginormous desk and that sort of thing. And then we've got building main mission and putting that spiral staircase in, which if you really wanted to, you could probably kit bash the proper staircase and then putting it together. Now, this, as I said, is kind of my sticking point of this kit, and I will get back to it and say why it's holding me back. Now, the rest of the instructions deal with putting the basic base together, and you can see they tell you to cut the extra surfaces off, and they say for gluing it together you can put some clamps on, and then they give you a couple suggestions as for filling in the seams. And then here they're just telling you where the buildings are going to go. Not a whole lot to this other than just putting the chunks of building down where they belong. And then here, I believe, are the upper story areas. And then finally, this portion here shows how you're going to put the landing pads on. And it gives you some, they're not rods, they're actually square section pieces of styrene. And you cut them to length to go between the various parts of your base. And once again, those are the travel tubes. All right, so let's meet the parts. The first sprue here has the two main walls of main mission, and then it's got a bunch of, won't really say crewmen here, but denizens of Moonbase Alpha staff. At any rate, they are not fantastic. Like, some of them have holes in them, but a little bit of putty and some nice painting, and you could probably do these up quite nice. The main thing is you had to decide who's who. I think that's probably Koenig right there. And that's probably Helena Russell. At any rate, oh, no, maybe that's Helena. I think that's Helena right there. I've made an executive decision. At any rate, here are our two side panels. Now this is a little annoying in that there are some ejector pin marks here, and they'll have to be addressed. So that's a little bit of a disappointment. Now some of these I think will be covered over by decals, but some of these panels are panels that are supposed to be lit. So that would definitely make things a little difficult here if you've got to deal with these ejector pin marks. Here are some more parts of main mission. This looks like parts of the desks, and these are the roof panels. And here is, I think, the observation windows, and these are for making that curved spiral staircase. And here are the seats. And the seats, they may look a little blobby, but in the series, the real seats actually were fairly blobby and indistinct. It almost looked like what we now would consider to be resin patio furniture. And here's some more parts of main mission, and this, I believe, is computer right there. Moving on. This sprue has the square section. I won't say tubing because they're solid, but they represent the travel tubes. And they tell you how long you're supposed to be cutting these, although you could probably just lay them up against the model and determine that yourselves. This is the floor of main mission and Koenig's office right here. And as you can see, this area is raised, and his office was raised over the rest of main mission. So that looks good. That's pretty accurate. Then we get into the buildings. And as you can see, some of them are pie-shaped, and that's the way they really were. And nice detail on them. I mean, there's no windows molded in or anything like that, but I think it'd be kind of crazy to do that, although I'm sure out there somewhere there's somebody who has put fiber optics into the ends of all of these things to represent windows. I'm certainly not going to go there. And here is another sprue containing building sections. Now, the last two sprues are interesting in that this one has two portions of buildings on it, and I think this is the only reason they give you this sprue. Now, if we look at it, you can see, oh, we've got 3 landing pads, and we've got 6 eagles. Okay, that's nice. I like that. Let's keep that in sight. Then we have this sprue. This sprue contains 5 landing pads, and it contains 6 more eagles that are quite a bit smaller. And from what I understand, this sprue is not original to the kit. This sprue is a later addition. I think at some point somebody criticized them and said, well, the eagles you include are too big for the kit, and these are the correct size eagles. So they are pretty small. And The other thing is they didn't have enough landing pads, so they basically retooled the landing pads. Although the pads themselves are basically the same size as those that were originally included. At any rate, we'll get into it later, but they do give you decals to put on these, so you don't have to get really artistic with blast effects and things like that. So, this kit gives you basically 12 Eagles, but you can only really use 6 of them, the smaller ones. And here's the decal sheet. Flip it open. And as you can see, we have decals to represent the many banks of computer, as Kano would say. And then we've got the main view screen, and then another terminal that goes underneath it. And these are probably for the desks. And then, of course, we have the decals to go on the Eagle landing pads. And those really look good. Like, I doubt if you could probably do as good as that. I mean, you could do the overall effect, but the very fine detail showing that it's made up of various small panels and things like that, that would be tough to achieve. So, and these are designed to go on the later versions of the landing pads that they give you. And that probably explains why the newer landing pads don't have the X molded into them, whereas the older ones did. At any rate, these decals look very well printed, and I don't see any registration marks or anything like that. And you can see that the copyright here is 2014. So that's basically when this release of this kit dates back to, is 2014. And 1975 is obviously when the original kit was made, and it had the earlier landing pads in it. All right, so at some point you guys are thinking, all right, Dan, why are you afraid to start this kit? What's holding you back? And it's not the basic base itself. That's not holding me back. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. What one I would like to do is, I suppose the question is what do you do with your close-up of main mission? And I don't think I'd really want to have it displayed separately, because all on its own it's pretty small. So what I was thinking is, if the base that you built Alpha on itself, if it was thick, maybe about 2 inches thick, and then at the bottom of that you had main mission in such a way that you built it so that it was a shadow box. So 2 inches of this would be inside, would be inset, and the rest of it wouldn't be sticking out that far, because you wouldn't want to smack into it with your shoulders you walked by or anything like that. But the idea is you'd be able to look at Moonbase Alpha up here, and then you'd be able to look in to main mission as a shadow box. I think that'd be a really cool way to build this. However, let's grab onto these panels. As any fan of the show knows, one of the hallmarks of the interior architecture of Moonbase Alpha is almost all of these inset panels were backlit. I'm assuming in order to make a very dark, depressing place that you're going to be working in order to make it brighter and that sort of thing. And as we see in the series, these walls could be set to have different levels of light. E.g., there was a definite night and day on Alpha, even though it didn't really correspond to sunlight. There was definitely a day and a night. And at nighttime, these panels would dim down. They would still be giving light. So the way I see it, if you were going to build this as a shadow box looking in, you'd want to have these panels backlit. I'm thinking surface mount diodes in behind. I think that's probably the way you'd want to go. Now, you would have to address these sections where you've got ejector pin marks. Not the end of the world, but it's still a little bit of a challenge. I've done almost no work ever with LEDs or surface mount diodes, so that's an area that's a little bit out of my comfort range. I know that I'd have to be doing a lot of experimenting and fiddling around before I could actually start building in earnest. That's kind of what's holding me back. I would really like to do Moonbase Alpha on a plaque on the wall, and then partially set into the base and partially sticking out would be main mission as a shadow box. To do that right, you'd really want to have these glowing panels and things like that. As well, probably some light coming straight down as fill light. That's my main reason for, do I really want to start this yet? And like I said before, I think everybody has in their stash a couple models where they start looking at it and they start saying, this is what I'd like to do with it, but I don't quite know how to do it yet. That's what's holding me back. And a suggestion that my kids have made, especially Logan, he said, wouldn't it be cool if you modeled all the various alien spacecraft that have crashed in and around Alpha? I mean, that would be a project in itself, but there's been more than one spaceship that's gone crashed around it. And not only that, how many Eagles have crashed in and around Moonbase Alpha? Maybe you should have a couple of, burnt out wrecks laying around. How far you want to take that is up to you. So that's it for the second part of our series, Kits I'm Afraid to Start, or Afraid to Build. And doesn't mean I don't want to build this kit. I really do. Because I can just see in the comments, I'll buy it off you, give it to me. I still want to build it. It's just a matter of getting everything all ready before I do it. I want to make sure I can do the diodes to light up main mission, and then I know exactly what I want to do with the base and everything like that. So, thanks for watching this episode of Dan's Model Works, and until next time, keep on modeling.